The instant Raiden Miller, an executive chef known for his meticulous plating and fiery temper, walked through. The swinging doors of the Gilded Spoon, a high-end restaurant where he was consulting, he spotted him. Dion, the smooth-talking new sommelier the owners had hired, was lounging. At a corner table, his dark, expensive suit perfectly draped. His hand was resting with unsettling familiarity on the shoulder of the woman, kneeling in front of him, who was busy pinning a cuff on his trouser leg. Even from that distance, Raiden recognized the familiar curve of her neck and the simple gold chain she wore. It was Nadia, his girlfriend of 8 years, and she was wearing the exact forest green utility apron he had insisted she take this morning. Just a few hours ago, Raiden had asked if she was free for a late dinner. Nadia, his sous chef and culinary partner in every sense, had hurried him out of their apartment with a quick, apologetic kiss, her voice full of strained exhaustion. Raiden, can we do it another night? A major catering order just got dropped on us for an immediate client presentation. It's all hands on deck. As a fellow professional, Raiden had completely understood the high pressure, demands of their field, simply telling her to rush to the kitchen. It seemed, however, that the urgent crisis that had squeezed in between them wasn't a demanding client, but the perpetually grinning Dion. Dion clearly saw Raiden standing in the doorway. A slow, triumphant smirk spread across his face, his whole expression reeking of smug superiority. No one at the restaurant knew about Raiden's long-standing relationship with Nadia. About 3 weeks ago, Dion had accidentally overheard Raiden on a rushed private call where he'd mentioned my girl, Nadia. A few days later, Dion had cornered Raiden during prep. I was wondering who could keep a talent like Chef Nadia anchored. Now I get it, he'd commented, his eyes assessing. Then he'd added, a bit too smoothly, if I could find a woman who was even half as dedicated to me as Chef Nadia is to your operation, I'd be a blessed man. At the time, Raiden had just dismissed it as awkward, ambitious flattery and changed the subject. But a suspicion lingered. Where had Dion gotten the impression she was so devoted to him? A week later, a playful barb from Chef Silas, the head baker, made Raiden realize something was amiss. That Dion, he calls everyone Mr. or Ma'am, but he calls Nadia Nadi. It's small, but you know, the way he leans in when he says it, it's a different vibe. Raiden largely blamed himself for not following his gut. His failure to investigate is how he ended up in this deeply embarrassing confrontation. Perfect. Just a little adjustment here. Nadia clapped her hands together, a focused look on her face, and stood up, turning to face the room just as their eyes met. She froze for barely a second, her thin lips pressing into a firm, self-contained line. Her expression was otherwise perfectly calm, as if she had been expecting this final reckoning for a long time. Dion glanced at her, his smile unwavering, and reached out to lightly brush her arm. What a stunning coincidence, Chef Miller. A coincidence. Raiden's mind raced. Dion had recently asked him about his future, probing, when do you plan to settle down, chef? I know this great bespoke tailor. Dion had even recommended this specific tailor to him. Raiden had secretly ordered the suit because just last week he'd found a brochure for an exclusive seaside resort, a spot they had always dreamed of visiting, tucked into the pocket of Nadia's chef jacket. He wanted to surprise her, to let her know he was finally ready to move past the grind of building their careers. It turned out he wasn't the one she was planning to build that future with. A sharp, sudden cramp hit Raiden's gut, the kind of visceral pain worse than a kitchen burn. He had to dig his nails into his palm, a habit forged by years of knife work just to keep his expression neutral. Dion broke the silence with an arrogant, glittering grin. Chef Miller, you know a lot about presentation. Care to be my best man? As the words left Dion's mouth, Nadia looked directly at Raiden, her brow slightly furrowed with a flicker of something unreadable. Before Raiden could even process the question, she spoke in a low, flat tone. Chef Miller is far too swamped with his consultancy. Why would he have the time for that? Stop jesting. Her voice held a hint of subtle bitterness, and it sent a cold spike through Raiden's composure. From culinary school to the endless punishing hours side by side in professional kitchens, their 8 years had been defined by work. The quiet, personal milestones other couples enjoyed were constantly replaced. by all-night prepping sessions and last-minute ingredient runs. When Raiden received a major consulting offer 6 months ago, a huge career boost, Nadia had subtly withdrawn. She'd buried herself even deeper in the kitchen, obsessively refining dishes and volunteering for every high-stakes competition. Raiden knew how intensely she hated being seen as second best. The last time her parents had delicately pushed them about marriage, she'd curtly replied that she was too consumed by her career to even think about it. So, when he found that resort brochure in her jacket, he had thought she was finally plotting a secret escape, a way for the two of them to move forward. He'd been profoundly touched, and he immediately ordered his own custom suit, planning to surprise her on their upcoming anniversary. Seeing Raiden's silence, Dion prompted him again, a malicious glint in his eye. "Chef Miller, it's settled then. You can share in our good fortune." Raiden shook his head slowly. "Can't make it. I'm in a period of mourning." Nadia's lip curled in a tiny, almost invisible smirk as she watched him. She knew perfectly well both his parents were thriving. Raiden gave a short, cold laugh. "My culinary partner just passed away," he said flatly. "The memory is still too fresh." Nadia's composure finally fractured. Her face fell, her lips pressing so tightly they were almost white. The tailor, a small man named Mr. Chen, who had been quietly beaming, emerged from the back, holding Raiden's new suit in a garment bag. He heard Raiden's last statement and froze, his face a mask of professional bewilderment. "Would you, like to try the fit, chef?" he hesitantly asked. Raiden just shook his head. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Nadia staring at the fine fabric peeking out of the bag. He remembered the year they graduated, when she had pointed to a custom apron in a shop window and asked, "When are you going to put a ring on it, Raiden?" "Soon," he had teased. The light that flashed in her eyes then was like a 1,000-watt bulb, full of promise, but it faded just as quickly. "I don't want you to feel obligated. I want to build a life where I can bring something substantial to the table, too." Her family had struggled financially, and the weight of professional achievement had always been immense for her. It wasn't the right time. Later, when they interviewed for their first major executive roles at the same time, the chief of operations, Mr. Sterling had asked her casually, "Young lady, do you have any serious attachments?" She had answered without a flicker of hesitation, "No, I'm professionally single." Standing right next to her, Raiden had been stunned into silence. She'd explained it afterward. "Mr. Sterling is looking for an apprentice who can commit fully. I didn't want him to think I'd be distracted by a relationship." Even though it left a sour taste in his mouth, Raiden had said nothing. She had her reasons and her worries, and he wanted to be the understanding, supportive partner. Maybe it wasn't necessary to publicize their bond at first, but later, it just seemed like the moment never came. Every time he brought it up, she would just smile and kiss his forehead. "We'll send invitations when we tie the knot. If we go public now, we'll just get bombarded with workplace drama." She disliked unnecessary fuss. Raiden could only console himself that she simply wanted to keep her private life private. She used to taste his sauces, critique his menu drafts, and whisper, "Just a little longer, and I'll marry you," whenever they parted after a long night in the kitchen. She hadn't said that for about 3 weeks, the same time she had quietly taken back her dedicated savings account card which he had been managing for her. Now he knew what big thing she had to take care of. It was the biggest commitment of their lives. His partner was settling down with someone else, and he hadn't even been worth a genuine conversation. Raiden turned and walked out of the tailor shop with the garment bag slung over his shoulder. When he got to the crosswalk, he looked back. Nadia hadn't followed him. Their last text exchange was from days ago. He had asked what time she'd be home. She'd replied with one word, "Swamped." When he clicked on her professional social feed, there was just a blank wall. She had blocked him at some point. Raiden called their favorite late-night diner to cancel their anniversary reservation, tossed the custom suit onto the passenger seat of his car, and rushed back to the Gilded Spoon. Chef Dubois, the executive chef, was a little surprised to see him back so quickly. "You pulled 3 double shifts just to get an afternoon off, and you're back after a few hours?" Seeing the hollow look on Raiden's face, he asked if everything was all right, explaining that his professional and personal partner of 8 years had just gotten engaged to the smarmy sommelier was far too complicated. "So," Raiden just muttered, A migraine. Chef Dubois then pulled him aside excitedly. Well, in that case, you need some gossip to clear your head. That's better than any pill. The one name Raiden didn't want to hear was, of course, the first one that came up. Chef Dubois leaned in conspiratorially. Nadia from the main kitchen is seeing that young sommelier Dion. They've been caught together several times, holed up in her office, reviewing the wine list for half the day. He comes out looking like he just finished a marathon. The nerve of some people. He looked Raiden up and down, a disappointed look on his face. I was even thinking of putting in a good word for you two. Culinary partners, a great team, you know each other's pace. What was Nadia thinking? Raiden couldn't manage a genuine smile. Maybe we just weren't a good recipe chef. Chef Dubois added that Dion had been openly broadcasting his desire to marry a renowned chef ever since he started. Someone even started an informal bet on which poor soul would fall for it. You have no idea how competitive it is to get a sommelier spot here, do you? For him to get in right after his certification, I hear he has a highly influential investor in his corner. That reminded Raiden of the murmurs among the kitchen staff. We never see him on the grueling night shifts. Having a major restaurant shareholder backing you is a whole different world. Nadia must have heard those rumors too. When Raiden got home after his shift, all of Nadia's chef gear and personal items were gone. A spare apartment key was left on the countertop with a small note tucked underneath it. The handwriting, the same neat, decisive hand that had scribbled notes for him in school and penned their first menu concepts, was still legible. The pressure of the industry consumes the best of intentions. I'm sorry. 8 years of a shared life dismissed with a single cold sentence. Raiden scrolled through a long list of missed calls on his personal phone, mostly colleagues he'd neglected. He randomly dialed one back. The other end picked up immediately. That prestigious overseas pastry program you mentioned last time, Raiden said. I want to take it. The person on the other end, an old mentor, said, Excellent, Raiden. I knew you'd see the light. Raiden didn't say another word and just hung up. He figured Nadia's recent spike in ambition and her sudden rush to marry Dion were probably all for this. For months, there had been whispers that the Gilded Spoon was partnering with a top-tier international culinary institute and would send one person for an exclusive exchange program. It was a career-defining move. Not only would a returning chef instantly be granted full creative control, but a vacant director of culinary arts spot was reportedly being held for that person. Looking down at Dion's cocky social media post, Raiden felt a cold calm settle over him. The caption read, Tasting the sweet life with my better half. The accompanying picture was of 2 glasses of vintage champagne clinking. Raiden recognized the delicate stemware. It was from a private collection only shareholders and executives used. A few days later, Raiden came out of a grueling high-volume service to find small bags of expensive artisanal wedding sweets piled on his prep station. Dion looked like he had been waiting a long time. He rushed over, beaming with self-satisfaction. Chef Miller, I brought you these personally. You simply can't refuse. Raiden took off his coat and glanced around the mostly empty kitchen. There's no one else around, Dion. Why are you putting on this performance? Do I even know you? Dion's smile froze instantly, and his eyes turned cold. The one who isn't publicly acknowledged is the outside distraction, Chef Miller. I actually feel sorry for you. She never once admitted to your arrangement, but the moment I asked, she made it official. You can't miss the difference between being chosen and not, can you? Raiden pulled out a stool, sat down, and smiled. Why would I regret losing someone who could be so easily replated? As for love, that's your tasting menu. I hope you two are stuck with each other for the entire 7-course meal. Dion's face paled slightly. Before we signed the final contract, she was free to choose a more suitable partner. If you got rejected, maybe you should consider where your presentation fell short. Raiden's smile deepened without him realizing it. Thanks for the professional critique. I won't be at the wedding. We're not colleagues in that sense, so I'll save the expense on a gift. He gestured for Dion to leave. The fact that Raiden didn't grab the nearest kitchen towel and choke him with it was a testament to his sheer professional self-control. They must have been in a desperate hurry to publicize their relationship. The entire restaurant, from the dishwashers to the front of house managers, received invitations and wedding candies. Raiden's phone wouldn't stop buzzing with texts from gossiping colleagues. Someone was clearly furious on Raiden's behalf because that same afternoon, a new glossy memo appeared on the staff bulletin board. The candidate for the Overseas Culinary Exchange Program had been officially selected. Raiden's photo was prominently displayed right there. It was one Nadia had taken of him years ago, laughing and slightly disheveled after winning a major regional cook-off. Unable to refuse Chef Dubois' enthusiastic insistence, Raiden's entire consultancy team went to a nearby upscale gastropub to celebrate. After a few rounds of craft cocktails, his colleagues' tongues loosened. "You should have seen the look on Chef Nadia's face," one of them recounted. "She just stood in front of the board for a full 15 minutes, completely destroyed. That'll show the sommelier section." "I told you could crush it, Chef Miller!" Chef Dubois, his usual reserved demeanor softened by a few drinks, cheered. "I told you to aim for it, but you wouldn't listen. In an elite kitchen like this, you have to fight for your spot. Those last few presentations you nailed were flawless. The investors aren't blind." Someone was already raising a glass, toasting to Raiden's future promotion to Director of Culinary Arts. A cold, dismissive snort came from behind him. "Celebrating a little prematurely, aren't we?" Raiden turned around. It was Dion, with Nadia on his arm. People from the main kitchen were with them. Nadia's face was impassive. She casually picked up an empty glass from a passing server's tray and filled it with water. "When do you leave?" she asked, her voice deceptively light. "Will you have time to cater my wedding reception first?" Her sarcastic tone was deafening in the sudden quiet. Raiden turned to face her completely. "The itinerary isn't finalized, but no, I won't have time. I'm swamped." She didn't leave. She leaned in, her voice a near whisper only for him. "Raiden, I never thought you'd be the one to deliberately burn a colleague." Then she straightened up instantly, her face a mask of pleasantness for everyone else. "Chef Miller is incredibly competitive, certainly very capable." Her colleagues filed into the private room next to theirs. As the door closed, Dion shot Raiden a venomous, controlled glare. Of course, Raiden knew how furious Nadia was. He had never been on her mental list of competitors for this program. Her rivals were a few other senior chefs. She knew he would never compete directly with her. Their silent agreement was to always support each other's aspirations. After dinner, Raiden and his team were dragged to a karaoke bar. It was a rare opportunity for everyone to unwind, and they were determined to make the most of it. It was past midnight when Raiden finally got back to his apartment. The hallway light flickered on. Nadia was slumped against his door, looking up at him with exhausted, red-rimmed eyes. "Raiden, please, will you withdraw?" Raiden walked over, his face cold and set. "Move." As he unlocked the door, she grabbed his hand, her voice filled with a desperate sorrow. "Can we please talk?" The frustration that had been simmering all day finally boiled over. Raiden leaned against the cool wall and looked at her. "Nadia, you dissolved our 8-year partnership with a single scribbled note on the counter. What, precisely, is left to discuss?" She paused, her head bowed. "Raiden, I know I betrayed you, but I genuinely can't afford to miss this opportunity. Did you rush to settle for him because you heard he had a major shareholder backing him?" Raiden asked, his voice low and dangerous. "A direct line to the top, which would make the training program a sure thing, right?" Her brow furrowed, and a flicker of shame crossed her face. "That's not the entire truth. She said that at first she just felt she should mentor the new sommelier, but things gradually got complicated. He's different from you, Raiden. I feel like I can finally relax around him. He always looks at me with this uncomplicated, simple adoration. But with you, the longer we were together, the more I felt like I couldn't measure up. I was constantly exhausted trying to catch up, but you would always effortlessly surpass me in your achievements." Raiden was speechless. He never imagined they had drifted so far apart that this was the core resentment she harbored. He had to take a deep, shaky breath to maintain his composure. "Nadia, whether it's my menu, my technique, or my relationships, I always give my absolute best. I always thought we shared that drive. I never once considered you saw it this way." He almost felt it would have been less painful, more honest, if she had simply admitted she was with Dion for the connections. He never expected this, that one day his own professional effort would become his original sin. She sighed, looking at him intently. In the end, I'm the one who doesn't deserve you. It's my flaw. After a moment of silence, she stepped closer, her voice pleading. Can you go to the main office tomorrow and formally withdraw? If you pull out, I'll have a real chance. You once said you would forfeit anything for me, remember? Back then, he had smiled and said if it came down to it, he'd definitely give up the chance. Raiden couldn't help but let out a cold, hollow laugh. You said it yourself. That was back then. Back then, I loved you. Now, do you honestly believe you've earned that sacrifice? She wouldn't give up and tried to follow him inside. He held up a hand, blocking the way. Do I need to call Dion to come fetch his fiancée? She froze, her face darkening as she stared at him. Raiden, do you genuinely have to twist the knife like this? Her expression changed in a flash, and for a second, he thought he was watching a bad theater performance. Raiden collected himself and spoke slowly. Nadia, Dion knows about us. He saw the photo in my apartment. Since you're getting married, let's just end this cleanly. Please don't come looking for me again. Her hands hanging at her sides clenched into tight fists and then slowly relaxed. Her face tense with suppressed emotion, she turned and walked away without another word. After that, Raiden was consumed by the demanding preparations for his overseas program and had no time to wallow in despair. Occasionally, he'd run into Nadia in the staff hallway, and they would both just coldly pretend the other didn't exist. His colleagues complained more than once. You two were a legendary team, for goodness sake. How can she be so petty? Even if it wasn't you, it's not like she was guaranteed to get it. Raiden would just smile and say nothing. Dion became even more ostentatious than before. He would praise Nadia to the high heavens to anyone who would listen, never forgetting to flash his heavy, newly acquired ring. Raiden ran into him a few times near the staff locker rooms, and Dion would strut past, deliberately bumping his shoulder. Raiden found his childish tactics almost pitifully amusing. Raiden thought he could make it to his departure date without any further drama, and finally put this draining 8-year saga behind him. But then the restaurant's new high-profile culinary innovation project submissions came up on the agenda, and Raiden had to prepare his extensive materials to deal with the proposal. A week later, the list of project candidates was announced. Both Raiden's name and Nadia's were on it. The day the list came out, Chef Dubois had a dinner meeting with a major food distributor, Mr. Hawthorne, and he dragged Raiden along. When Raiden walked into the private dining room, he deeply regretted not asking who would be there. Mr. Sterling, the chief of operations, was there, and so was Nadia. Mr. Hawthorne was already well into his cups and immediately raised his glass when he saw Raiden. I hear Chef Miller is heading overseas soon. This drink is for you. When you return, you'll be the most sought-after culinary expert in the city. Nadia's face soured. She gripped her wine glass so tightly her knuckles were white. Just as Raiden was about to take the glass, Mr. Sterling subtly blocked it. He can't handle hard spirits, Mr. Hawthorne. One glass, and he's down for the count. I'll take this one for him. Raiden froze, unable to stop him, and could only sit down quietly. They chatted animatedly during the meal. Raiden just ate his food, drank his sparkling water, and felt like he was sitting on a high-heat grill. Halfway through the dinner, Mr. Hawthorne went to the restroom. The moment the door closed, Nadia, who had been completely silent the whole time, suddenly stood up. She raised a glass to Mr. Sterling, shooting a meaningful cold glance in Raiden's direction. Since we have this opportunity, there's a professional matter I'm unsure if I should bring up. Mr. Sterling looked at her and put down his glass, intrigued. Is this regarding the restaurant's business, Chef Nadia? Not entirely, she replied. After all, Chef Miller and I were a team for many years. I figured it would be better coming from me than from someone less informed. Now, even Chef Dubois, who had been joking around, stopped smiling and looked at her. Nadia continued. Chef Miller's execution skills are second to none, but his research methodology is a bit shaky. Some of his experimental data in the submission was handled sloppily. It's fine for a casual team review, but if it's submitted as a high-stakes project, proposal, any external expert will see the glaring flaws immediately. Raiden stared at her, stunned. The certain cold conviction in her eyes made her seem like a complete stranger. Mr. Sterling and Chef Dubois both looked at Raiden, their faces full of confusion. Nadia never met Raiden's gaze. It would be wiser to withdraw Chef Miller's project from consideration, she proposed. He's going for the overseas training anyway, so it's best he focuses his energy entirely on that. Her eagerness to bring it up so publicly made Raiden realize her true, calculated intention. This wasn't professional concern. If his research project was exposed as fundamentally flawed, how could he shamelessly proceed with the prestigious overseas training? Killing two birds with one stone. No wonder Nadia was so willing to burn all their bridges. Raiden slowly stood up. Chef Nadia's reminder is very timely. I almost forgot. To ensure absolute accuracy and repeatability, I reran the data experiments a few more times. It's a perfect time to release the latest definitive results. I'd love to hear everyone's feedback. Nadia followed Raiden all the way to the restaurant's parking lot. She grabbed his arm, her face grim, and pinned him against his car door. He was so angry he instinctively tried to twist away, but she held tight, her eyes simmering with cold, furious desperation. You were holding out on me, she hissed. Raiden had indeed run several additional rounds of testing after his initial project submission. It was a rigorous, defensive habit he developed in culinary school. Data isn't static, Chef. It can change under different variables. I just never thought it would be necessary to keep a backup like this. He looked at her, his voice utterly devoid of emotion. I told you every step of my experiment progress. I shared all my raw data with you, no reservations. You knew there were issues, but you never once pointed them out. Nadia, which one of us is more despicable? Defeated, she let go, then suddenly braced her hands on the roof of the car, taking a few deep, shuddering breaths. Raiden, I know you despise me, and you have every right to. I understand all of it, but can you please not ruin my future? She turned her head to look at him, her eyes pooling with sorrow. Do you think it wasn't agonizing for me to sacrifice 8 years of a relationship? But I cannot give up this opportunity. Raiden suddenly remembered something she used to say in school. She cherished every opportunity because she was terrified there wouldn't be a next time. Losing control, she slammed her fist on the car roof several times, finally breaking down. What more do you want from me? The sudden, desperate, unplanned kiss caught Raiden completely off guard. Without thinking, he raised his hand and shoved her back firmly, avoiding a slap but making his rejection undeniably clear. Nadia. Her shoulders slumped. She looked utterly defeated, like a stray dog begging for a scrap. Do you need me to beg you, Raiden? If I call off the wedding right now and we get back together, will you withdraw from the program? Raiden had never seen Nadia so broken, so willing to discard her pride. She was a complete stranger, and the sight of her chilled him to the bone. No, he told her, enunciating each word with finality. I wasn't willing to get back together, and I wasn't willing to give up the program. She let out a heavy sigh, stood up straight, and stared at him, her eyes red. Lately, I keep thinking about our time in culinary school. You'd wait for me, no matter how late. You'd put your own research on hold to assist with mine. Everyone said we were the perfect blend. Even my parents said you were a good man. They've long seen you as their son-in-law, me and him. She paused, gesturing vaguely toward Dion. My parents still can't accept it. They're still angry, asking me why I had to do this. She gave a bitter, sharp smile. It's not that I don't want to succeed, but the industry is ruthless. It doesn't matter how hard I work. I don't even get the same exposure or opportunities you do. She brought up when they started at the restaurant. She chose a highly sought-after kitchen role, thinking she could make a name for herself. But the dishes you created were truly impeccable. Even I felt inadequate watching you. I always thought about when I could have my moment in the spotlight to make you see how formidable I could be. But I never got the chance. Hadn't Raiden also thought about the past? She was broke in school, but she never forgot to sneak him a small, perfect artisanal pastry for his birthday. Even when her meal card was nearly empty, she would still use her last funds to take him out for late-night ramen. Looking at the person in front of him now, he just felt a heavy wave of profound sorrow. Nadia, I was never your competitor. In the past, all I wanted was your partnership. Now, you have nothing left to offer me. The Culinary Innovation Project proposal made it through the 3-day public review period without a single hitch. A company-wide seminar was held afterward, during which Mr. Sterling spoke pointedly. Some of our staff are too focused on short-term gains. They haven't even sorted out their personal commitments, yet they're busy trying to compromise their colleagues. This kitchen is not a battlefield. There's no room for so much destructive ambition. He didn't look at Nadia, but out of the corner of Raiden's eye, he saw her lower her head in the front row. Chef Dubois nudged Raiden and mouthed some words. She messed with the wrong chef. With the project submission successfully concluded, Raiden's trip abroad was back on schedule. He applied for a few days of annual leave to get some much-needed rest. That day, after much persuasion, he finally agreed to have his dad over for dinner. Raiden was planning to order gourmet takeout, but his dad showed up with armfuls of exotic groceries, incredibly excited. "Son, I'm making us a 5-star surf and turf." Raiden had no choice but to clear out the entire kitchen for him to work his magic. Just as he was plating the last course, there was a commotion at the front door. His dad, busy slicing a prime cut of steak, didn't even look up. "That's probably the premium ingredients I ordered. Son, grab the door!" Raiden steeled himself and went to open it. Standing outside were Nadia and her parents. The moment they saw Raiden, her parents broke into wide, obsequious smiles and practically walked right in. "Raiden, we were just in the area for a doctor's appointment. No other reason. Just thought we'd stop by and see you." Raiden was stuck, not sure whether to block them or let them in when his dad walked out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. Nadia froze, her eyes wide. "Director..." It was the most awkward dinner Raiden had ever hosted. Nadia's parents sat ramrod straight, ever since they found out that Mr. Sterling, the chief of operations, was Raiden's father. They acted like nervous students during a performance review. They smiled excessively at Raiden. "How come you never mentioned it? If you'd told us earlier, we would have paid a formal visit ages ago." Raiden just smiled, unwilling to explain. His dad, however, was a man of the world and could navigate any awkward conversation. "My son has always held a bit of a grudge against me since his mother passed. He doesn't usually like to deal with me, and he's extremely self-reliant. It took a lot of convincing just to get him to agree to have dinner together. Years ago, there were complications during his mom's recovery from a procedure, and she developed a severe infection. Meanwhile, Raiden's dad was deeply engrossed in his work and a complicated private life. Although he became deeply remorseful in his old age and focused solely on his family, Raiden could never entirely forgive him. He had never told anyone about this. Nadia clearly misunderstood the situation. She had been cold and reserved since she walked in, but now she suddenly spoke up. Raiden was probably just trying to avoid any appearance of favoritism. "Imagine if people found out." Raiden glanced at her. His dad just chuckled and continued. "My son gets that stubbornness from me." He was dead set against applying for this restaurant at the time. Nadia's lips tightened into a pout, her brow furrowed. Raiden had refused, but she had insisted on submitting his application for him. She'd said that chefs are too busy for a proper life, and if they were, in the same restaurant, at least they would see each other all the time. She was probably regretting that decision now with every fiber of her being. Nadia's parents started mentioning their relationship, but quickly stopped themselves. "And colleagues, Director, we hope you'll look after them in the future." Raiden's dad smiled thinly. "Isn't Chef Nadia getting married soon? I heard she's marrying a young sommelier. She's moving on up." Raiden had to admire him. He really knew how to turn the heat up. His dad patted Raiden's hand, which was resting on the table. "My son is going abroad soon, so he probably won't be able to make the wedding. But I could certainly serve as the wedding master of ceremonies." Nadia's face went white, but she still managed to force a smile and raise her glass. "Well, thank you in advance, Director. I was just wondering how to ask you..." The dinner felt like a perfectly executed ambush. When it was finally time to clear the dishes, Nadia rolled up her apron sleeves and said, "I'll handle this." She expertly gathered the plates and went into the kitchen. Her parents exchanged a look, then sat up straight again to have coffee with Raiden's dad. Raiden pushed open the kitchen door. Nadia was staring blankly at the sink full of dishes. She snapped out of it when she saw him. "Why didn't you say anything sooner?" she whispered fiercely. Raiden leaned against the counter. There was nothing to say. She bit her lip and looked at him, her eyes desperate. "If you had told me sooner, maybe we wouldn't have ended up like this." Raiden laughed, a harsh sound. Nadia, are you telling me now that if my father were the chief, you wouldn't have gone after Dion? Or are you just regretting that you missed out on the opportunity? She was silent for a moment. I know you look down on me now, but why did you suddenly show up here? He asked, changing the subject. Don't tell me you wanted your parents to be your lobbyists to convince me to give up the overseas training program. A flash of genuine embarrassment crossed her face. No, they really were here for an appointment, and they felt they should come see you. And I was the one who wronged you in this, and I wanted to see you too. See what? Raiden asked. To see if I'd still be interested? To see if I'd suddenly have a change of heart now that you think I'm the top prospect? She was silent for a moment, her hands braced on the sink. Raiden, do you know what I hate most about you now? How relentlessly ambitious you are. She gave what looked like a bitter smile. But that's exactly what I loved about you back then. You were braver than me. Raiden was speechless. When she loved him, his defining trait was bravery. Now that she didn't, it was aggression. He had asked her once why she liked him. She thought for a moment and replied, watching you argue your concept with the toughest critic, I wanted to be brave for once too, to fight for myself. He was just a brief moment of courage in her otherwise cautious, calculating life. 8 years later, she chose to leave without a second thought. She turned on the faucet and began to wash the dishes. Her movement was slow. She washed them one by one, letting them drain before putting them in the cabinet. As she wiped the counter, her hand paused. A single tear fell, splattering on the polished surface. She stared at it, and then another one fell. She spoke slowly, her voice thick with unshed tears. I remember a time when I wouldn't even let you do things like wash dishes or peel vegetables. Those hands of yours weren't meant for this kind of work. Back then, I really thought I could protect you for the rest of our lives. Raiden straightened up and pulled open the sliding kitchen door. He looked back at her one last time. Nadia, maybe we should have broken up the moment we graduated from culinary school. Everything after that was just you waiting for a better opportunity to come along. The sky's the limit for you now. I won't wish you happiness. As her parents were shown out, they bowed and scraped, showering Raiden's dad with compliments. They didn't notice Nadia's red-rimmed eyes or her lowered head. Raiden closed the door and took a deep breath. Are you really going to be their MC? His dad nodded solemnly. Don't try to stop me. A week later, Raiden was at the top-tier research institute overseas, having just finished the welcome dinner. Because of the time difference, it was broad daylight there when his dad video called him. It was a lively wedding scene, bustling with guests. His dad held up his phone to give Raiden a tour of the venue. There was an arched floral gateway and a giant heart-shaped ice sculpture standing next to the couple's wedding portrait. The camera flashed past, and Raiden thought he saw beaming Dion. Hang up, Raiden said. I'm going to sleep. But then a familiar voice cut in, and Nadia appeared on screen, looking reserved in her wedding dress. She had come to ask Raiden's dad to take his place in the front row. Their eyes met awkwardly across the thousands of miles. She froze, then managed a wistful smile. Raiden, is everything in your new kitchen going well? Raiden smiled back, a genuine, easy smile he hadn't felt in weeks. It's excellent. She stared at him, the roar of the crowd in the background. She had actually come to find him one more time before he left. Standing outside his door, she had asked carefully if she could see him off. There's no need, Nadia. Our menus have long since diverged. There's no reason for them to cross again. That was only a few days ago, but seeing her now felt like looking across 1,000 mountains. His dad patted her shoulder and said, Don't just stand there, dear. It's almost time. Nadia nodded and walked away, her shoulders slumped, her steps heavy. But Raiden's dad didn't hang up. He just chuckled and said he was bored and wanted Raiden to talk to him. Raiden couldn't argue, so he just set the phone on the table and went to wash some fruit. Soon, the wedding march began. A new couple was about to be joined. Raiden came back with a bowl of fruit and resignedly watched the ceremony while he ate. His dad went up on stage. The camera could only capture his chin. He gave a few generic polite remarks, then suddenly changed his tune. You know, this young man, Dion, he didn't actually pass his initial assessment when he first came to the restaurant. But his benefactor, one of our restaurant's silent shareholders, begged and pleaded to give him a spot. He's quite fond of the young man, telling me to just think of it as the establishment sponsoring a decorative member of staff. Benefactor and shareholder. How delightful. The grape Raiden was eating paused midair. His dad chuckled. We couldn't put him in any important roles, of course. We specifically instructed that he was not to handle major inventory or client negotiations. This young man is quite capable, though. He managed to snag our restaurant's youngest and most promising chef. Now I can finally rest easy. And with that, he wished the newlyweds a happy marriage and a lifetime of devotion. Raiden's dad might as well have had human resources come on stage and tell Dion he was being demoted. His dad walked off the stage, his steps light, his face flushed from holding back laughter. Raiden heard him mutter as he walked, "To think he'd dare to bully my son." The absolute nerve. Raiden suddenly wanted to laugh, but his eyes were getting hot. His dad adjusted the phone's camera, and Raiden saw the MC on stage already prompting them several times. "Will the bride and groom please come to the stage?" But Nadia stood motionless, her fists clenched, her face ashen. Beside her, Dion's eyes were red. He kept shaking her arm, but he couldn't move her an inch. Nadia's parents came forward, looking embarrassed, seemingly trying to persuade her. After a long while, she looked up, her lips pressed into a thin line. Raiden knew that look. Whenever she was about to break down, she would tilt her head back to force the tears down. As if burning her last most important bridge, she grabbed Dion's hand and stormed toward the stage. She moved so fast that Dion stumbled and staggered behind her. To the sound of the wedding music, the two of them walked onto the stage. One with a grim, determined face, the other with eyes full of panic. It was the most interesting wedding Raiden had ever seen. The MC cleared his throat, plastered on a professional smile, and asked Nadia, "Is our beautiful bride a little nervous? Maybe we can have the groom show some affection. Give us a little kiss?" Dion, in his expensive suit, forced a smile. He was about to lean his head on Nadia's shoulder when she shoved him away with open disgust. He stumbled back 2 steps, nearly falling off the stage. All the pent-up, fragile emotion finally burst. Dion started bawling openly. "Nadia, you can't abandon me! We already have the signed papers." Nadia shot him a cold, withering look and then burst out laughing, a sound that bordered on hysterics. "Perfect. Then this is our divorce ceremony." Dion's face turned white as a sheet. His crying stopped abruptly as he stared at her in utter disbelief. Nadia's gaze seemed to shift toward Raiden's dad's phone. "I regret it." A chill breeze rushed past her cheek, and she finally let the tears fall, her smile tinged with a devastating sadness. The scene immediately devolved into chaos. Dion's enraged father rushed onto the stage, grabbed Nadia by the collar of her white gown, and started yelling curses. The sound of crying, shouting, and curses set against the gentle wedding march was darkly comedic. Many guests took out their phones and started recording with great interest. The MC, who had clearly never encountered such a scene, awkwardly tried to intervene, but eventually gave up. A sudden flash of lightning and a torrential downpour began. The crowd below scattered like frantic birds while the brawl on stage continued. "Damn, this rain is too heavy," Raiden's dad said, and hastily hung up. Raiden stared at the black screen for a few seconds, then couldn't help but laugh out loud, a genuine, cleansing laugh that shook his shoulders. After that, Raiden didn't hear any concrete news about either of them for a long time. Work at the Research Institute was demanding. He spun like a top every day, often feeling like he was back in the pressure cooker of culinary school. About a year later, Chef Dubois called with a cheerful update. After a long preamble of asking how Raiden was, he finally gave in to his gossipy nature. "You remember Nadia, right? Your old kitchen partner?" Raiden grunted acknowledgement, turning off the loud lab equipment. It happened not long after that fiasco, but their divorce dragged on for a year. It only just got finalized. The sad thing is, Nadia's career is essentially finished. To get the divorce, she used every trick in the book. Secret recordings, hiring a private investigator. She finally managed to catch Dion in a very compromising situation with the old shareholder. But she lost focus. She badly misdiagnosed a critical order, and the client protested at the restaurant entrance with a scathing review for over a month. This morning, I saw her packing up her things, looking utterly defeated. She has to pay the client's losses, which is a huge sum. Raiden felt a slight pang of residual sorrow. Despite the ugliness between them, she was supposed to have a brilliant, fulfilling career. He suddenly remembered a text from an unknown number a few months ago. If two chefs have drifted apart in this world, does it mean they'll never create a dish together again? He didn't reply. He just deleted it. 2 years later, his exchange program ended. After his plane landed, Raiden went home first. The doorway was piled high with packages of all sizes. He casually tore one open. It was a shattered, incomplete jigsaw puzzle. He could vaguely make out that it was a photo of him and Nadia from years ago. A small card was attached reading, "My dearest, happy birthday." He realized all these packages must have been from her, gifts for every holiday over the years she'd been pulling away. He couldn't even remember when she had stopped having the time to prepare these things for him. It seemed to start right after that big executive interview, when she began to subtly distance herself from their relationship. The package on top had a recent date, from just a few days ago. It was a huge box. He opened it. Inside was the custom-tailored suit he had thrown in his car. It was carefully cleaned and pressed. The attached card had a single line of text. "I am not as resolute as you thought, and now not as brave as I thought. Raiden found a waste management service and had them haul everything away. You don't want any of this? Looks like you haven't even opened most of it," the collector said, both surprised and delighted as he looked over the pile of boxes. Raiden shook his head. "Don't want it. It's just waste to me now." After returning to work at the restaurant, Raiden heard more news about Nadia. A colleague said they saw her looking for jobs everywhere, but top restaurants all share information, and no one dared to hire her. "She asked about you the other day. I told her you were back and doing exceptionally well." Raiden just smiled and closed his phone. "I need to change my number. I'm getting way too much unsolicited junk mail." A few seconds ago, a message from Nadia had landed in his junk folder. Sometimes something has to disappear to prove its value. He imagined her sweating, clutching her resume after another rejection, wistfully typing out that line. He suddenly laughed out loud. A few more years passed. Raiden was at a crosswalk with a takeout sandwich when he saw Dion. He was carrying several large shopping bags, hurrying to catch up with a heavily pregnant woman who was much older than him and wore cheap, unflattering clothes. The disheveled woman was picking her teeth as she walked, impatiently turning back to urge him on. As he passed Raiden, he shot him a quick, fearful glance, then immediately looked away. A bicycle sped past, grazing Dion. Raiden instinctively reached out and pulled him back by the arm. Dion looked at him, still shaken, and mumbled, "To thank you, Chef Miller." The woman had already started cursing. "Don't you have eyes, you useless fool? Why couldn't you have been more careful?" She gestured toward her belly. "And be faster. I'm hungry." Dion lowered his head miserably and hurried after her. Raiden looked at the bags scattered on the ground. Various discounted, near-expiration food containers had spilled out. A perfect, tasteless metaphor for their lives now. A gentle breeze blew past, carrying the sweet, clean scent of blooming orange blossoms. The clouds in the sky drifted and scattered, moving on. You can't rewind the timer on a perfect meal.